The ancient marble halls of the Vatican echoed with silence as Captain Lorenzo Benedetti knelt before Pope Francis, his Swiss Guard uniform immaculate for the final time. After 27 years of unwavering service, the last moment had arrived. With trembling hands, the battle-hardened soldier gently took the Pope's hand and kissed the papal ring, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Holy Father," he whispered, his voice breaking, "when I first swore my oath, I promised to give my life for the Church. Today, I realize I've received far more than I've given." The Pope's eyes widened as Lorenzo continued, "My service has taught me that true strength lies not in weapons, but in mercy." Cardinal Bianchi, standing nearby, turned away to hide the tears now freely flowing down his face. No one in that sacred chamber would ever forget what happened next. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories of faith, sacrifice, and profound moments that changed history, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. The story of Captain Lorenzo Benedetti began long before that emotional farewell in the Apostolic Palace. Born in a small village in the Swiss Alps, Lorenzo came from a family with 5 generations of Swiss Guard service. His father, Giovanni Benedetti, had served under Pope John Paul II, while his grandfather had protected Pope Paul VI during some of the Church's most turbulent years. Lorenzo was just 19 when he arrived in Rome, a tall, broad-shouldered young man with piercing blue eyes and unwavering determination. On May 6, 1996, he took the sacred oath to protect the Pope with his life, as hundreds of Swiss Guards had done before him since 1506. But unlike many of his predecessors, Lorenzo's service would be marked by extraordinary challenges that tested not only his physical courage but the very foundation of his faith. During his first year, Lorenzo was merely a sentry, standing guard at the bronze door, the main entrance to the Apostolic Palace. Hours would pass as he stood motionless, his halberd held perfectly upright, his eyes scanning the crowds of tourists and pilgrims. Some days, the monotony seemed unbearable, but Lorenzo never complained. He was serving God's representative on earth, and that purpose filled him with pride. Lorenzo's first true test came in 1998. A deranged man somehow bypassed security, carrying a concealed knife, and lunged toward Pope John Paul II during a public audience. Lorenzo, though not officially on duty at that precise moment, reacted instinctively. He threw himself between the attacker and the Pope, sustaining a deep gash across his forearm. The wound would leave a permanent scar, a badge of honor that Lorenzo never spoke of, but wore with quiet dignity. "I was just doing my duty," he told his commanding officer later that day as doctors stitched his wound. "The oath I took wasn't just words. It was a promise before God." This incident earned Lorenzo rapid promotion and the respect of his fellow guards. By his 5th year of service, he had risen to the rank of corporal, then sergeant, and eventually became one of the youngest captains in the modern history of the Swiss Guard. His leadership style was unique, demanding absolute excellence but leading always by example. What many people don't know is that the life of a Swiss Guard extends far beyond the ceremonial duties visible to the public. Behind the colorful Renaissance uniforms designed by Michelangelo himself lies a highly trained security force. Lorenzo became an expert in modern security techniques, counterterrorism tactics, and close protection protocols. Yet he never lost sight of the spiritual dimension of his service. Every morning before dawn, Lorenzo could be found in the small chapel of St. Martin, named for the patron saint of soldiers. There, in the soft glow of candlelight, he would pray for strength, wisdom, and the protection of the Holy Father. This daily ritual became the cornerstone of his service, providing the spiritual fortitude needed for the challenges ahead. The most difficult period came during the transition from Pope Benedict XVI to Pope Francis. The unexpected resignation of Benedict in 2013 created unprecedented security concerns. Lorenzo, now a senior officer, worked tirelessly during the sede vacant, the period when the papal throne was empty, coordinating with Vatican police, Italian authorities, and international security agencies to ensure the safety of the College of Cardinals during the conclave. When the white smoke finally rose from the Sistine Chapel chimney, announcing the election of Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio as Pope Francis, Lorenzo was among the first Swiss guards to greet the new pontiff. Their relationship would grow to be one of mutual respect and, eventually, deep friendship. Pope Francis, known for his humility and disregard for excessive protocol, initially presented unique challenges for Lorenzo and his men. The Pope's insistence on direct contact with ordinary people, his spontaneous ventures into crowds, and his preference for simplicity over security measures tested Lorenzo's professional capabilities to their limits. "Holy Father," Lorenzo once said during a particularly tense security briefing, "my oath requires me to protect you, even if that means protecting you from your own compassion at times." The Pope had looked at him with those penetrating eyes and replied, "And my calling requires me to be a shepherd among his flock, not a prisoner behind guards." This tension between security and accessibility became a defining dynamic of their relationship, but also the source of its depth. Lorenzo learned to adapt security protocols to accommodate the Pope's pastoral style, while Francis came to understand and respect the guard's sacred duty. In 2018, during a papal visit to a dangerous region torn by civil unrest, intelligence reports indicated a credible assassination threat. Vatican security officials recommended canceling the trip, but the Pope refused. "These people need hope more than I need safety," he insisted. Lorenzo, now the most senior captain, proposed a compromise. The visit would proceed but with unprecedented security measures. What happened during that visit remained classified for years, but Vatican insiders now reveal that Lorenzo personally thwarted an attempt on the Pope's life during a public Massachusetts. The details remain shrouded in secrecy, but those close to both men noted a profound change in their relationship afterward. The Pope began to seek Lorenzo's counsel not just on security matters, but on personal ones as well. Few people know that Swiss guards are more than just soldiers. They are witnesses to history's intimate moments, silent observers of papal private life, confidants who see the human being behind the sacred office. Lorenzo had observed Pope Francis in moments of joy, sorrow, doubt, and illumination. He had seen the weight of the world's problems bend the Pope's shoulders in private, only to watch him stand straight and strong in public, carrying his burden with grace. As years passed, Lorenzo became more than just the head of the Pope's security detail. He became something akin to a friend, albeit one bound by the strict protocols of Vatican hierarchy. The Pope would occasionally invite Lorenzo to join him for simple meals in his modest apartment at the Santa Marta residence. During these rare private moments, they spoke not as pontiff and guard, but as two men dedicated to service, each in his own way. In 2021, tragedy struck Lorenzo's personal life when his wife Sophia was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. For months, he maintained his duties while spending every available moment at her bedside. A Pope, learning of this personal crisis, did something unprecedented. He visited the hospital, not as the head of the Catholic Church making an official visit, but as a pastor comforting a family in pain. "Your faithfulness to duty while carrying such a heavy cross has taught me about strength," the Pope told Lorenzo that day. "Now let the Church be faithful to you in your time of need." When Sophia passed away 6 months later, the Pope himself celebrated her funeral mass, an honor typically reserved for heads of state and Vatican officials of the highest rank. This profound gesture of compassion cemented the unique bond between the pontiff and his protector. Lorenzo's final years of service coincided with increasing global instability. The rise of extremist threats against religious leaders worldwide prompted a complete overhaul of Vatican security under his direction. He modernized the Swiss Guards training program, equipment, and protocols while carefully preserving their 5-century-old traditions. What many observers noted was how Lorenzo had evolved from a purely military leader into something more complex. The young guard who had once seen his role in strictly physical terms, standing between danger and the Pope, had matured into a man who understood that protecting the papacy meant protecting what it represented: mercy, compassion, and hope. In private conversations with younger guards, Lorenzo would often say, "We carry halberds and wear armor from another age not just as tradition, but as a reminder that what we protect is timeless." As his retirement approached after nearly 3 decades of service, Lorenzo began preparing his successor, a promising young captain named Marco Rug. "Remember," he told Marco during their final training session together, We protect not just a man, but a message. Sometimes the greatest threats are not physical but spiritual: cynicism, despair, the belief that power matters more than compassion. The day before his formal retirement ceremony, Lorenzo requested a private audience with Pope Francis. This was to be their real farewell, away from the pomp and protocol of official Vatican ceremonies. The Pope welcomed him to his private library, the room where he received heads of state and made decisions affecting millions of Catholics worldwide. No one knows exactly what was said during that private meeting, but those waiting outside reported that it lasted far longer than scheduled. When Lorenzo finally emerged, his eyes were red from weeping, yet he walked with the peaceful demeanor of a man who had completed his life's purpose. The official ceremony the following day was attended by the College of Cardinals, diplomatic representatives from Switzerland and Italy, and the entire company of Swiss guards standing at attention in their full ceremonial armor. Lorenzo, wearing his dress uniform for the last time, marched slowly across the San Damaso courtyard to where Pope Francis waited on a simple chair rather than the papal throne traditionally used for such occasions. Following custom, Lorenzo knelt before the Pope to return his service sword. As the blade was laid across the pontiff's lap, a symbol of completed service, the courtyard fell into deep silence. Lorenzo then reached for the Pope's hand to kiss the ring of the fisherman, the official papal signet that has symbolized the authority of St. Peter since the earliest days of the Church. It was at this moment that Lorenzo spoke the words that would move even the most stoic cardinals to tears. With his head still bowed, his voice clear enough to carry across the hushed courtyard, he said, "Holy Father, when I first swore my oath, I promised to give my life for the Church. Today, I realize I've received far more than I've given. I came to protect you, but you have protected my soul. I came carrying weapons, but you taught me that true strength lies not in arms, but in mercy." Lorenzo paused, struggling to maintain his composure before continuing. "In our darkest times, when violence and hatred seem to prevail, you have shown me that the light of compassion can never be extinguished. I have watched you forgive those who others deemed unforgivable. I have seen you reach out to those that society has cast aside, and in doing so, you have taught me what it truly means to follow Christ." His voice breaking, Lorenzo concluded, "The world sees me as your protector, but the truth is that you have been mine. You have guarded my faith when it faltered and shown me that the greatest courage is found in humility. For this, Holy Father, I owe you a debt I can never repay." Cardinal Bianchi, the Vatican Secretary of State known for his reserved demeanor, was the first to be seen turning away, unable to hide the tears streaming down his face. One by one, the assembled cardinals, men who had navigated church politics for decades, who had witnessed history unfold within Vatican walls, found themselves equally moved. These princes of the Church, often divided by theological perspectives and cultural backgrounds, were united in this moment of raw humanity. Pope Francis, visibly moved, broke with protocol. Instead of remaining seated as tradition dictated, he stood and helped Lorenzo to his feet. Then, in a gesture that left the assembled crowd in stunned silence, the Pope embraced his former guard. "My son," the Pope said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "you speak of debt, but it is I who am indebted to you, for while I have tried to show mercy through words, you have shown it through your actions. When violence threatened, you answered with courage. When duty demanded sacrifice, you gave without hesitation. Christ tells us there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for others. You have lived this teaching every day." The Pope then did something unprecedented in modern papal history. He removed a small pectoral cross he had worn since his first day as pontiff, a simple silver cross rather than the jeweled ones worn by previous popes. He placed the chain around Lorenzo's neck. "This cross was given to me when I was a young priest in Argentina," the Pope explained. "It has reminded me daily that leadership is not about power but service. No one has embodied that principle more than you. Carry it now as a reminder that you will always be part of the Church you have served so faithfully." By now, there was not a dry eye in the courtyard. Even journalists, trained to maintain professional detachment, found themselves caught up in the profound emotion of the moment. This was not just a retirement ceremony, but a rare glimpse into the genuine humanity behind the formality of Vatican traditions. As Lorenzo stood to attention one final time and prepared to march away from a life of service, Pope Francis raised his hand in a final blessing. The Swiss Guard band began to play, and Lorenzo's fellow guards raised their halberds in the traditional salute as he walked between their ranks for the last time. What few people realized was that Lorenzo's influence would continue long after his retirement. The training programs he had developed, the balance he had struck between ancient traditions and modern security needs, and most importantly, the spiritual dimension he had brought to the Swiss Guard service would shape the institution for generations to come. Lorenzo returned to Switzerland, to a small house in the mountains not far from where his story began. He established a foundation to support the families of Swiss Guards, particularly those facing illness or hardship. Once a month, he would receive a handwritten letter from Rome, personal correspondence from Pope Francis that continued until the pontiff's own final days. The legacy of Lorenzo Benedetti extends far beyond the walls of Vatican City. It reminds us that true protection isn't merely physical but spiritual as well. His story teaches us that sometimes the strongest warriors are those who understand that true strength lies in compassion, and that even in institutions steeped in centuries of tradition, it is individual human connections that matter most. Former Swiss Guard members still speak of the Benedetti way, a philosophy of service that balances unwavering vigilance with profound humanity. Young recruits are told his story during their training, learning that they protect not just a person or an institution, but the very ideals of faith, hope, and love that the Church represents. Perhaps the most telling testament to Lorenzo's impact came 3 years after his retirement, when Pope Francis was asked by a journalist about the most important lessons of his papacy. After a moment of reflection, the Pope replied, "I have learned that sometimes those we think are protecting us are actually teaching us. Sometimes the student becomes the master, and the protected becomes the protector." Today, visitors to St. Peter's Square might notice the Swiss Guards standing at attention, their colorful uniforms and ancient halberds a living link to Renaissance tradition. What remains invisible is the spirit that animates their service, a spirit profoundly shaped by one captain who understood that the greatest protection we can offer each other is not force but love, not weapons but wisdom. In a world increasingly divided, increasingly violent, Lorenzo Benedetti's final words to Pope Francis offer a powerful reminder. True strength lies not in arms, but in mercy. And judging by the tears of the Cardinals who witnessed that exchange, it is a message our world desperately needs to hear.